Hello cruel world, my name is Dr. Sohom Das. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders for a living so that you don't have to. So in this episode, I will discuss the following. How do the police interrogate their suspects? What's the psychology behind police interviews, and also what's the psychology behind police interrogations? I educate while you lemonade. No, hang on. I educate while you vegetate. So this the theory that I'm talking about will work for all investigations, but for this episode, we're going to focus specifically on murder because we both know you love it. If there was a Netflix series called Making a Pickpocket, you wouldn't watch that stuff.
Tell me about your registration plate, because that's unusual. What's the story behind that?
That's what my Catholic grandmother-in-law keeps saying. It was
what,
just
with the 666?
Yeah.
Okay. How did you come by that registration plate?
My mum got it for my birthday.
Okay, so is there any significance to the numbers?
No, just
no.
that I'm a little devil, and she's just.
Was that the joke? Was it?
Firstly, the police form an emotional connection. They may pretend to be pally and understand the perpetrator's point of view. They may make them feel comfortable, for example, offering them food or a blanket or an orange mocha frappuccino with extra sprinkles. Next, they tend to ask how questions rather than why questions. So during police interrogations, they pretend to show empathy with the perpetrator, and sometimes they might even pretend to blame the victim. On top of all of this, they might use alternative questions. So this gives the suspect a less egregious alternative, which is more morally acceptable, even though the interviewer doesn't truly believe this. For example, they might say to a murderer, "She overdosed. It wasn't her fault. You just found her body. Just tell us where the body is so the family can find some closure." So the suspect might go along with this, and then later on, when the police have more evidence, then they'll turn around and charge that naive fool with murder. And the detective might even make the scenarios seem more morally acceptable by taking out the emotion. For example, they might just say, "Look, we're just fact finders here. That's all we're here to do, all right? We're not here to pass judgment. The family need to know where the body is. There's no need for you to withhold that information from them. You could do a good thing here. I know that you're not evil. We all make mistakes." These are all classic police interrogation techniques. They might even approach the interview with an overt assumption of guilt rather than arguing it or leaving it on the table for debate.
We want to understand why you did it.
Yeah.
We want to understand why you stopped her to pick her up. Was it to give her a ride? Are you afraid to tell us that you gave her a ride? Maybe you wanted to make a couple bucks as an Uber driver, and she told you, I had to go sign a lease at One North, and you're like, "Oh, I know where that's at. I'll drop you off." If you're afraid to tell us that you gave her a ride someplace, we can work with you there. But I know that you picked her up. I know you did. I saw you in your shirt, arms fully extended.
So if you watch some footage clips, you will see that police often constantly ramble and they repeat themselves. And I noticed this, and I have to admit that at first I thought it was really unprofessional, because when I'm giving my psychiatric interviews as a consultant forensic psychiatrist, obviously I'm not trying to trick or pressurize the patient for any information. I'm very open, and I'll never talk over them. I'm just trying to entice conversation out of them, and I let them lead that conversation. However, I've since realized that the police use these interrogation techniques intentionally, and that's so the suspect can't concentrate in gaps in the conversation, which makes it harder for them to make up their lies. By the way, I've got videos up on this channel about both how you detect lies in general and also how polygraphs work and how reliable they are. So look out for those videos. They'll either have very recently been released or will be soon. Keep an eye out for them. Collect them all, kids. Often, the police interviewers allow the suspect to spin a very complex web of deceit, despite them actually having contradictory evidence. For example, say a suspect went out on a Tinder date and he states that the girl who ended up being murdered and him parted ways after they had a meal. And he might say he went down one particular street on his own on the way home. And the police might have CCTV footage that contradicts this and that shows the suspect and the victim walking together towards the suspect's house. Okay, but instead of the police cutting the suspect off immediately and telling them that they know it's a lie, They do the opposite. They actually buy into the story and they pretend to believe them, and they cajole more information out of the suspect. And this is for a couple of reasons. First of all, it gives the suspect more confidence, so he believes that the police officer is believing his story. And then, suddenly, part of the interrogation technique is that they abruptly, after 5 minutes of talking with this lie, they disclose this information to the contrary. And that is for the second reason. That's to disorientate the suspect, because it makes it harder for him to lie on the spot now that he knows he's been caught. And it also makes it harder for him to wriggle out of the lie he's just been telling, because he can't just pretend that he misspoke or misremembered, because he's just been spending the last 5 minutes going into details and describing this lie. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when we first practice to deceive. That is a famous philosophical quote by Spider-Man. Just as a side note, there is a Swedish man named Stor Bergwall who is believed to have been a serial killer and confessed to multiple murders whilst he was incarcerated in a mental health institution for personality disorders. And it turns out that they were all false confessions. In fact, I've done a whole video series on false confessions. Check him out. But, dear viewers, I've got a question for you. How many murders do you think this man, Stor Bergwall, confessed to whilst he was incarcerated? As always, the answer will be later on in this video. So, back to interrogation techniques. If all of what I was talking about before fails, you can go for a classic: good cop, bad cop. If the empathy and the friendliness is not working, then what you do is you get another cop to come in who is very aggressive, often arguing with his own colleague, and he just doesn't care what the perpetrator says. He says things like, "I know you're guilty, I just want to see you burn." So when he leaves, the suspect is left with the nicer cop, and who almost apologizes for his partner, and he tells the suspect that he wants to help, and he just wants the suspect to be understood. And thereby the perpetrator is much more likely to respond to the friendly behavior of this cop after such a threat, despite what had happened before.
So it was completely clear that you were not honest during the testing, and I think you already know that. You did not pass the polygraph test.
Okay.
Okay. So now we need to talk about what actually happened. And I feel like you're probably ready to do that.
I didn't lie to you on that polygraph, I promise. Chris, I know. Stop. It's time. Just stop for a minute. Take a deep breath. I want you to take a deep breath right now.
In the UK, the Police and Criminal Evidence Act in 1985, otherwise known as the PACE, has encouraged much less confrontational kind of interviewing techniques in the UK. So leading questions are no longer allowed, and a presumption of guilt shouldn't be had when the police investigator enters the actual interview, although I imagine it's not possible to really quash somebody if they have an assumption of guilt, but at least it can't enter into the questioning. And also repeated questioning is discouraged because it might make some vulnerable suspects just eventually agree with the cops because there's so much pressure and not necessarily telling the truth. In fact, research actually shows that truth finding produces more confessions and less false confessions than adversarial kind of battling it out accusations. Similarly, a good rapport with the suspect rather than being very accusatory or aggressive results in more confessions. So before I tell you a bit more about Stor Bergwall, I would like to introduce you formally to this channel. What you're watching is a Psych for Sore Minds. It's a YouTube channel hosted by me, Dr. Sohom. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders in prisons and in court and secure psychiatric units. I make a whole range of videos, some of them about individual mental illnesses and diagnoses, some of them about high-profile true crime cases, some of them about specific aspects of the law and criminality, like this one. Sometimes I interview ex-patients. What I'm trying to say is there's something for everybody on this channel. Go check out my videos. And I implore you to subscribe, because not only does it help me out immeasurably, but it makes Prince Andrew sweat on both sides of his face. Back to the Swedish man, Stor Bergwall, who is believed to have been a serial killer, and he confessed to how many murders? Drum roll. It was 30 altogether, 30. I mean, that's pretty impressive. So if you got the answer within 10%, then book yourself in for a massage and you can bill me. I will pay it, no problem. It was claimed that Bergwall's confessions were made from bad therapy and were led by this cult-like group by a particular psychologist. So Burgewall was undergoing recovered memory therapy, and he was on benzodiazepines at the point during the police investigations. And on top of all of this, details of the confessions were wildly wrong, and it was obvious that he was relying on hints and body language from his interrogators to guess the answers expected of him. Benzodiazepines, by the way, are sedatives which me and other forensic psychiatrists, we give to some of our patients on psychiatric wards when they become very agitated. And this is done to calm them down. Valium is probably the most well-known of the benzodiazepines, as in, cool, calm, just like my mom with a couple of Valium inside her palm. Mr. Mischief with a trick up his sleeve, roll up on you like Christopher Reeve. Sorry. Benzodiazepines cause confusion, disinhibition, and disorientation in some cases. So it's not the ideal drug to give to somebody when you're trying to get confessions out of them. So here's some advice for my dear viewers. Next time you find yourself in a situation where you have like a spy captive and you're really trying to get a confession out of him, I would highly recommend sodium thiopental. Although I should warn you that due to concerns that have been raised by those pesky European courts of human rights, they're always ruining our fun. So the Burgewall case raised questions about how murder convictions like this could have been obtained with such weak evidence. And some people have even gone as far as to call it the largest miscarriage of justice in Swedish history. Now, personally, I believe that was when Sweden won the Eurovision Song Contest this year with the song Voices. By the way, I've done a whole series of videos on hearing voices, check them out. Okay, so I hope this video has been helpful. I'd like to conclude with some advice. Definitely don't kill people, okay? Call me old-fashioned, but I think murder is just not cool, man. And don't be put in a position where you're innocent but being suspected of murder. And if you do, be wary of the investigators being your friend. What I'm saying is, by all means, take the hot chocolate, maybe even ask for a couple of extra marshmallows. Sure, but don't get too panicked. Your next stop might be prison. Dun dun dun. Okay, do me a favour and tell everybody that you know about this channel. Spread the love. I need more subs. Until next time, stay euthymic, and please do not forget, I love you.